So it's been over a month since we last saw Ricky Pearsall out on the football field in uniform for the 49ers. He banged his knee against Jacksonville on September 28th, and we are now a day shy of Halloween. He has already missed 4 games. So he could have gone on IR because that's a 4-game minimum, and no one really would have noticed except for the 49ers who are counting their return from IR slots. A lot of people asking me, where's Ricky? Well, he's been out on the side of the practice field rehabbing. And John Lynch just spoke about this on KMBR. He confirmed that this is a PCL injury, which is an injury that also got Christian McCaffrey last year in Buffalo. McCaffrey banged his knee on the hard turf in Buffalo as it was snowing, freezing conditions over there in the Northeast. That ended his season, and at the time for Christian McCaffrey, it was a 4 to 6 week injury. The 49ers, though, just shut him down because that season was lost for San Francisco anyway. He would have been ready had they made the playoffs right around the time of the playoffs. I think that was what everything was lining up to be for Christian McCaffrey. So this is not the same exact case with Ricky Pearsall, but it is an injury to the same ligament, to the PCL in the knee, after he did bang his knee. And I will say it probably was a catch. I think he got both feet in bounds against Jacksonville. Didn't count. Would have been an amazing catch. Might have helped the 49ers win that game. Anyway, if you're looking at 4 to 6 weeks, if it's the same timetable, then right now would be the window of Ricky Pearsall's return. I think when this injury initially happened, the 49ers thought that it wasn't as serious, that they could week to week Ricky Pearsall and maybe he'd be back in 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, that hadn't been the case. They need him at full speed. Wide receiver is a position where full speed is a requirement coming into and out of breaks, especially in a timing-based offense. If you are 10% slower than you usually are, that could lead to an interception on a play that otherwise would be a touchdown. Because a lot of times the quarterback is throwing to a spot. And if you're not in that spot as a wide receiver, then it's going to be really, really tough luck for the offense. Anyway, John Lynch spoke a little bit more today. Of course, he tackled the topic of trades moving forward for the 49ers. But first, we got to talk about the trade that already happened. And so much of my analysis has been based in the analytics of Keon White's performance athletically. And the 49ers were obviously looking at that as well. I think a lot of people don't realize how heavily invested into this the 49ers are. They try to marry the analytical look at a player through some of the R&D and the numbers with their look on tape at Keion White. So I've been talking a lot about his tape, what he's done on the field, what he did against the 49ers last year. Kyle Shanahan had that great quote about Keion White before they even played. But I've also been looking at the relative athletic score and all those metrics. And the 49ers, as it turns out, were too. Let's listen to John Lynch talk about the scouting of Keion White.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of different things. Our analytics here, Matt Plonsky, our guy who leads the charge, they do a tremendous job. I think a big part of analytics is you better allow them into your building. And so Kyle and his coaching staff do a great job of allowing them in their meetings so they can hear over and over, what is it that Chris Kasarik really likes in a D lineman? What is it that Saleh wants? What is it that Kyle wants? And the more they hear, they come up with different things to measure and apply data to that can confirm what our eyes are seeing. Or sometimes they know, all right, your eyes might see that, but the data says otherwise. Are they around the quarterback? How quickly do they get off the ball? What type of penetration do they get on a down in, down out basis? And it's really got a high correlation to the good players, and it's data, so it's real. And we've had great success with it over the years, particularly at that position. And Keon's a guy who scores very well there, and then that's confirmed with everybody else's eyes. So good process. And like I said, when we have alignment throughout the organization, we tend to do very well on these guys.
So here up on the screen, you see Keon White's athletic scores coming out of college at Georgia Tech. John Lynch and the 49ers staff, they look further into things, and they're starting to look at pressure rates and NFL performance. And that's also a lot of what we cited. Keon White has a pressure rate of over 15% when rushing from the inside. That's a good pressure rate, especially for somebody you're not you're not projecting to be a primary defensive end or defensive tackle. This is somebody that's going to be involved in the 49ers rotation. I always say if you can have 3 to 4 plus pass rushers in a unit, then you are a long way toward being able to dictate some games with that defensive line. And the 49ers are very, very dependent on a return from Bryce Huff. That's either going to happen this week, not very likely this week, but probably next week against the Rams. He's going to be the bell cow of this defensive line. I think they're also going to be dependent on a return from Yetur Gross-Matos, and there you have 2+ pass rushers ready-made. Those guys have been there. They've done that. They've scored the way the 49ers need them to score, and all the analytics tests that I'm talking about right now that John Lynch was mentioning on KMBR. The trade for Keion White was a hope from the 49ers that they could get another plus pass rusher, find a hidden gem, somebody who had seen diminishing playing time in New England under a new regime, but last year had blown the socks off the 49ers, had 45 pressures in 2024, can rush from the outside or the inside, can set the edge against the run on those early downs as a firm defensive end, but then can use that size and that speed, the combination of size and speed that you saw in the relative athletic score with all that green against guards on the inside. John Lynch expanded a little bit more on that during this interview with KMBR.
Like looking at this whole, this defensive end, defensive line, really at the trade deadline, you're looking at everything. You're taking inbounding calls, you're taking out making outbound calls, and we had a focus on that position. And Keon was a guy we just kind of we've talked before, when we have alignment, we really hit at a high rate. And so, it's something that scouting, way back to the draft process, really had an affinity for Keon and his game and what he could do for us. Then you watch him develop. He played extremely well last year, played very well against us. So those things tend to stick with you and make an impression upon you. We followed him through. He kind of had Mike Vrabel came in, and that sometimes happens with new coaching staffs. He's a really good player, but he doesn't quite fit with what they were doing, and so he wasn't playing as much this year. But our analytics liked him, and then you bring it downstairs to our coaches, and they're huge fans, and so it kind of was. We were looking at him and a number of candidates. At the end, then you don't quite know these people because they haven't been in your building. And so you rely on relationships and things and of people. At the end, I called Mike Vrabel and just hey man, tell me what happened. And Mike kind of gave me that. I've known Mike for a long time, and we felt comfortable and felt like he's a guy who could really help us. And the cool thing about Keon, he's got this year and he's got next year. So it's not just a rental. It's a guy we can have as part of our program for a while, that we think we can really untap some of his limitless, potential. So we're excited about it. Now Keon's got to assimilate really quickly.
There was a meant to be moment in all of this. John Lynch's daughter plays soccer for Brown University on the East Coast. They're playing at Providence, Rhode Island, which isn't far from Boston, which is where the New England Patriots are based, near Foxborough, Providence, Boston. That's all New England. John Lynch was actually back east for one of his daughter's soccer games. And then Lynch flew back on the 7:20 a.m. JetBlue flight from Boston Logan Airport to SFO on Wednesday morning. And on that flight with him was Keon White. So the 49ers GM personally picked up the new trade acquisition, brought him back to the Bay Area. One of those moments that everything really aligned. And then yesterday I showed you the video, Keon White on that 49ers practice field. This is one of my favorite videos because it really illustrated how the NFL works. Sometimes you get traded and You have to run out onto the practice field, meet your D-line coach, and meet your teammates seconds before you take your first drill. This is Keon White at practice yesterday wearing the number 56. Look, there he is saying hi to Cleveland Farrell, 96. It was Farrell and White, both with their first 49ers practices, at least of this season. Farrell's already been with this team. And I think that the success that Farrell had with San Francisco in 2023 with Chris Kasarik, the D-line coach there wearing the hat, coaching up Keon White, I think that is a big, big hope point for the 49ers with White. I'm going to read you a nice quote from Cleveland Farrell in a little bit. So here's that first ever practice rep for Keon White, fresh off the plane from Boston. Now, he's going to go over and start to get some tips from assistant defensive line coach Greg Scruggs with the padding on. Scruggs, it looks like he could still play right now. Maybe the 49ers need to activate him. He played for the Seahawks during his career, but the guy is absolutely jacked. Hands-on coach. That's the job that Daryl Tapp used to have, and then Tapp went back home to Washington. But Scruggs there working with Keon White. Cool moment there, dapping up his teammates, saying hello to Chris Kasarik for the first time, and then heading straight on into his first drill. But this right here, there's a quote from Cleveland Farrell that I think is very emblematic of the Chris Kasarik effect, which is what we should be talking about more right now regarding the defensive line, since he's finally getting some reinforcements into that building via trade and via signing of Farrell. But this right here is up on the San Francisco Standard. I wrote this article yesterday. So we talk about Keon White and falling out of favor in New England, the new coaching staff with Mike Vrabel, whom John Lynch actually talked to. You heard when John Lynch was speaking, gave a good review on Keon White and his personality, just explained that it didn't work out in a football sense because they changed schemes. Well, Farrell was a former first-round pick whom the 49ers signed back in 2023, and now he has re-arrived. He has rejoined the team on the same day as Keon White. I think that's fitting because Farrell yesterday in the locker room credited Chris Kasarik with breathing new life into his career. And the 49ers hope that that can help, same coach can help Keon White, a former second-round pick, in a similar way. He's really big on speaking life into people, instilling confidence in his players, Cleveland Farrell said of Chris Kasarik. When I first came here, I was trying to reinvent myself, and he was somebody who reassured me on being who I was every single day. So one of the biggest variables in all of this is Chris Kasarik. Farrell, that was one of the tried and true rehabilitation projects along the defensive line. Arden Key, maybe the 49ers still try to trade for him from the Tennessee Titans. Maybe he can have a second go-round with the 49ers. That was a guy who turned his career around. The predecessor for Keon White, sixth-round acquisition back in 2021, Charles Omenihu, he turned his career around under Chris Kasarik. Keon White has already flashed a lot at the NFL level. I mean, 45 pressures in a year, 5 sacks. It's no chump change there. He's got a lot of talent. Just last year, Kyle Shanahan was glowing about Keon White before the 49ers even played New England. Then he had 5 pressures. He leveled Brock Purdy. He beat Aaron Banks bad. A nice little rip swim move. And it was one of those plays you look at it and you're like, wow, this guy's got some juice. And a pass rusher with juice, the 49ers didn't have that on Sunday against the Houston Texans. So they have that now. And John Lynch made the point today on the radio that Jackson Dart, with a lot of the run option stuff that New York has and just pure scrambling stuff that he can bring to the table, defensive linemen are going to have to be ready to pursue Jackson Dart. And hopefully Keon White isn't too worn down after 2 cross-country flights in the span of about 3 days, because he's got to fly right back out to the East Coast. But so does John. John's older, right? John doesn't have to play, though. I fly more than these guys. That they shouldn't be complaining. They get comfortable room on the plane. A lot of the guys get first-class seats. Maybe they can even give Keon White one of the United Polaris lay-flat seats for this flight, since he just had to come in from Boston on jet blue, but they'll get him ready to play. He's going to be in that lineup. Lynch essentially confirmed that on the radio. He stopped short of fully confirming it, but obviously the plan is for Keon White to plug right in. I think the plan is for Clelin Ferrell to plug right in. They could use one of his 3 practice squad elevations right away. And the 49ers defensive line is going to look a lot different than it did last week. I mean, these are 2 valuable additions for San Francisco right away, and you're going to need them to chase around Jackson Dart. Now, New York is not as strong offensively without Cam Skattebo. I get it. New York is nowhere near as good defensively as Houston, so the 49ers should be able to control the ball and keep their defense off the field, but it was still important to bolster a defensive line that you could see here. There is a lot of pink injury shade in that D-line room. Probably no Huff. Elliott was back out at practice yesterday, so I'll take the shading off of his name. Okawanu practiced in a limited capacity. According to Kyle Shanahan and the practice report before, the planned participation chart, but we didn't see him out there during the open media window, so I'm going to keep Okawanu shaded in pink. No practice for Alfred Collins. No practice for Yetur Gross-Matos. So, you know, you're looking at some potential issues with both tackle and end, but mainly edge rusher. You're probably not going to have Huff, and you're looking at a Michael Williams, Robert Beal, Keion White, and Clelin Ferrell room if Okawanu can't go. If Okawanu is limited, then maybe you still elevate Clelin Ferrell so you have 5 defensive ends, because I don't think that Yetur Gross-Matos is going to go in this game. Up to 50% of your defensive end room could be different on a week-to-week basis coming from the last game against the Houston Texans. That's a huge change, but they needed a change because the pass rush was so non-existent last week. As far as Brock Purdy goes, it really does sound like this is getting closer and closer and closer. I'm going to go out to the practice field today. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have now both said that the MetLife turf is not going to factor into their decision-making as far as who plays and who doesn't. I have a tough time believing, though, that if you need a tiebreaker, like if this is right on the bubble and you've got natural grass coming up the next week and artificial turf this week, I have a hard time believing that it won't factor in at all. That being said, I was talking a lot about this the last couple of weeks as we were projecting forward with Purdy. There also is a turf versus rust equation that probably goes into the 49ers thought process. And, you know, if he is going to come back on natural grass against the Rams with a number 2 defense in all football a week from Sunday, do you want him coming back cold turkey, or would you rather him get some game action before then? Unfortunately, the game action would have to come on the artificial turf of MetLife Stadium. So I know that's not ideal, but I do wonder if the 49ers are grappling with that balance. I will say that Mac has looked a little bit hobbled to me this week. Mac Jones is coming off the knee contusion in Houston. He always seems to be able to get it together for the game if he's needed to play. But the last time that Brock Purdy started instead of Mac Jones was in week 4. It was the same game that Ricky Pearsall got hurt, and Purdy aggravated the toe in that game. That was a week where Purdy was actually healthier than Jones in the lead up to kickoff. I think there's a chance that Purdy is again healthier than Jones this week, just based on me reading the room. I think it's close, and I think that they're playing the long game with Purdy as they should, because one hit in week 4 last time sent him back a month. And no, I think Kyle Shanahan was over dramatizing that. I think the point is that the one hit aggravated the injury for Brock Purdy. It wasn't as bad as it was after week 1, but it definitely made the 49ers realize that they cannot afford to just bring Brock Purdy back just so he is yanked out of there again. Like, they can't have this back and forth with their QB1 if they want to have an elite offense down the stretch of this season. So they said, let's shut him down. Let's bubble wrap him. Let's make sure that this rehab takes properly, and then let's get him back out there once he's very close to 100%. And the 49ers timeline there, their conservatism with this was reinforced by the fact that they were winning games. They got up to 5-2. Obviously, they're coming off of a loss now. it might change the calculus a little bit. I mean, if you win this game, you're 6-3 and you're still in really good position. And if you feel that Brock Purdy gives you the best chance to win this game, you really have to take that potential competitive edge into balance, into account if you're the 49ers. And that's where they are entering Sunday. So back out at practice today. We're going to see who's taking those first team reps. We're going to see, we get all these clues when we're watching practice, right? We can tell who's on the inside track to start. And that's why we predicted this correctly over basically every week, that both Mac Jones and Brock Purdy have been at practice. It hasn't been shocking news on Friday. I'm still not sure after Wednesday's practice this week, which goes to show you that Brock Purdy is a more and more involved participant as time goes. I will have to be sure after today because I'm headed to New York on Friday morning. So I'm going to have to make my best guess today based on what I see at practice. John Lynch also talked about the upcoming trade deadline. I'll give you his exact quote. I have this written up on my X account as I transcribed it while John was talking. It will take a good deal for the 49ers to make a move. It seems to me that they are staunchly against any type of overpay. And sometimes you're for an overpay because you're desperate to make some kind of impact for your team. They believe that with Bryce Huff returning, with Keion White aboard, with Clelin Ferrell aboard, they believe that they're in a position of strong leverage to wait for a potential opportunity that strengthens their team, not just in 25, but heading into 2026. And Lynch said, quote, "We never say never to more trades," but then he said, and I start the quote again, "We'd like for whoever we trade for to be here for more than this year. We also don't want to eat into our draft picks too much." They believe that the 2024 and 2025 draft classes were so strong, in large part due to the fact that they had a ton of darts to throw up against the wall, and they don't want to give up all too many more darts. They gave up a sixth round pick for Keon White. And it's worth it for the 49ers to give up a dart in the draft itself if that player that they get back is under contract beyond this year, because then you're inheriting a rookie contract. It's essentially like a draft pick, but you actually already have some NFL tape on him. So it's less of a crapshoot than a draft pick. You already know what Keon White can do at the NFL level versus what somebody that you're picking in April can do at the NFL level. Still, I think I'm on the more aggressive side of the coin than John Lynch on this particular issue, on the pass rusher issue. That said, he just did make a trade, so you can't say that they're not doing anything. But I'm going to continue to hammer home the fact that the 49ers have added only one plus pass rusher by the metrics, by the composite metrics, only one above average pass rusher over the entire Lynch-Shanahan tenure through the NFL draft. Nick Bosa. That is it. Every other above average pass rusher that the 49ers have fielded in the Shanahan-Lynch tenure has come through either trade or free agency. D Ford, 2019. 2021, Charles Omenihu. 2025, Bryce Huff. I mean, that's just a smattering of the names right there. There are about 5 or 6 of these guys that the 49ers have had, plus pass rushers over the time of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and all but Bosa, who was a slam dunk draft pick at number 3 overall back in, or number 2 overall back in 2019. All but Bosa have not come through the NFL draft. So you could argue that the 49ers aren't good at drafting pass rushers, or you can argue that they just haven't been in position to draft an elite edge rusher. However, we've gotten to this point. The truth of the matter is that the premium type of talent, or at least the upper half type of talent that you need at one of the most important positions, has not generally entered the 49ers building through the draft. And for that reason, I would urge them to consider the trade market and continue considering the trade market because they already have made one of these trades. But I think they should continue considering the trade market as perhaps their primary means of talent acquisition at the very important edge rusher position. That's my strategy. That's the way that I look at this. Now, it does take two to tango. The 49ers are interested in Trey Hendrickson. John Lynch didn't say that they weren't, but the Bengals currently aren't interested in trading him. At least they're posturing that way. There might be Will McDonald the fourth to get from the New York Jets. Maybe Kayvon Thibodeau's available, but probably not, and that would come at a very high cost. The Giants have broadcast that they don't want to trade Thibodeau. Maybe the 49ers can change their minds. Lynch is in a spot right now where there still is a round of games to be played ahead of the November 4th trade deadline. It's next Tuesday. A lot can change in as far as how teams think between now and November 4th. But Lynch has to play this from a position of strength. It's how he got a good deal for Keon White and wasn't looking desperately for somebody. It was waiting to see a strong trade come back for the 49ers in terms of they didn't want to give up too much and they wanted to find somebody who aligned not only with the coaching staff, but with what their analytics department was looking for and who also aligned contractually with what the 49ers were looking for. They got that in Keon White. Now they're hoping that they could find something similar at a price that doesn't cost all too much draft capital. That's what he said today. Now, he doesn't define exactly what too much draft capital is. So there still is a lot of gray area there. So it's a lot like Kyle Shanahan yesterday saying that he'd be very surprised if Juwan Jennings isn't on the team by the end of this season. Yeah, in all likelihood, they're not going to trade Juwan Jennings, but it's not 100% certainty. So if they ended up trading Juwan Jennings, then you could say, well, yeah, I'm surprised that we traded him because I didn't think that it was likely. As you can see, the language here matters. These guys are saying that some things are not likely, but they're not saying that they're impossible. And there's a difference between those two things. And that's why the next week is going to be so intriguing, because some things that might seem impossible now might turn into possibilities by the time that 1 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, November 4th hits. That is when the trade deadline is coming. 49ers practice again today. Then they walk through or go at walkthrough speed tomorrow. Official walkthrough is not going to be until Saturday. They're going to fly on Friday to New York as they attempt to move to 6-3. Let's take a look at the team tier chart, shall we? I think this could be some fun viewing on this Thursday morning. I'm going to answer some questions as well. We've got all that coming down the pipeline, but we're going to set up this matchup with the New York Giants first. All right. This is where the league is at right now. As you can see, the Tennessee Titans are still the worst team. The Bengals are still really bad. It's unbelievable that they're holding such a hard line with Trey Hendrickson if they're not bluffing right now. They're down here, second worst defense in the league to only the Dallas Cowboys. The Giants have a really bad defense. By EPA, they're number 27 or number 28. The run defense is especially bad for the New York Giants. You could see them below the 49ers here. And by the way, the 49ers have been tumbling defensively. They hope that this Keion White edition and the Cleveland Farrell edition help stop some of the bleeding. But they're not as bad as the New York Giants. And that's the big edge that the 49ers have to take advantage of in this game. Last week, you played these guys up here, the Houston Texans. This week, you're playing a defense on the polar opposite end of the spectrum in the New York Giants. You have to control the ball because the Giants, their offense has been better than Houston's technically. I know there's no Cam Scatterbo anymore, but Jackson Dart has brought some juice to this offense. He'll run around a little bit. He can break the 49ers' backs on some critical third downs in this game with his legs if San Francisco doesn't rush in a disciplined fashion. And if they don't get pass rush like they didn't last week, then any NFL quarterback, even CJ Stroud, is going to look good. So the advantage the 49ers have to take care of here is the advantage that they're going to have over the New York Giants defense. Because we know that the 49ers' own defense is compromised, like severely compromised right now. And I'm not saying that the offense is out of the woods. I mean, we don't even know if Brock Purdy's going to start. They're on QB2. Probably no Ricky Pearsall. We'll see on both of those fronts at practice today, but Pearsall's not practiced in over a month. There's no Brandon Ayuk yet. Maybe his practice window opens next week, but we're also going to have to see on that. So the 49ers have been shorthanded on both sides of the ball, but it's the defense that's been hit the hardest because that's where there's no Bosa, no Huff, no Yetur Gross-Matos. They don't have a single plus pass rusher. We'll see if Keion White can deliver in that regard for the 49ers after the trade. The communication has not been good with the linebackers to be expected after Fred Warner was knocked out with the dislocated and broken ankle. Without a pass rush, that's really troublesome because sometimes if you can get to the quarterback really quickly with your defensive lineman, it doesn't matter if you're not communicating as well on the back end because the quarterback doesn't have time to process it. But if the pass rush is as anemic as it was, and when they didn't blitz against the Texans, they only got home 3 times with pressures. They didn't get home with a sack at all, but with pressures, they only got home 3 times. Well, CJ Stroud was able to sit back there, see exactly where the 49ers failed to communicate on the back end, and then throw a check down to Woody Marks, who was uncovered, who ran 50 yards. So just the idea of getting to the quarterback 0.2 of a second quicker can eliminate some of these communication errors on the back end. And the 49ers are hoping that Keon White can be a rising tide that helps lift all boats after a particularly miserable performance against the Houston Texans. Let's talk. I'm ready to answer some of your questions on this beautiful Thursday morning. It's 9:30. We are sitting here ready to go to Santa Clara, a little overcast day in the Bay Area. I'm not really sure if the sun is going to come out. I already swam earlier today. It was foggy in the water. It was a little chilly, but it felt really good. So I now want to answer some of your questions. We answered a lot last night. We did a nice little episode of Late Night Lombardi, first one in a while. Gave you a nice view of the city. Maybe we do another one of those tonight before I fly out to New York tomorrow morning. But I want some good questions as we talk for the next few minutes. Somebody's saying the 49ers should have tried to trade Bosa for Myles Garrett. Yeah, and why would the Browns say yes to that? Please, let's be realistic here. Is there any news on Jacob Cowing? The news I have on Cowing is that he's been working off on the side and rehabbing. Cowing needs to be a good enough blocker to force his way into some playing time for the 49ers. I think that's been the issue for Jacob Cowing. Just because he's fast doesn't mean that he's going to fit well into what the 49ers are doing if he can't block. And he might be close to full health coming back from the hamstring, but there might not be an obvious spot to activate Jacob Cowing given what the 49ers are running. Didn't Myles Garrett just have 5 sacks yesterday or the other day? Teams aren't just going to trade just to trade. Somebody's trying to say, oh, they would trade because Bosa is a younger guy. If all you did was look at players' ages and trade players based on that without looking at any other extenuating circumstances, especially the financial ones, you'd run an NFL team into the ground really, really quick. So some of this trade stuff, this is fantasy land stuff. And I think that this particular one, Nick Bosa for Myles Garrett before the season, yeah, that was never going to happen. Mark asks, any linebackers available for a trade? I think that Quincy Williams might be available. I don't know if the 49ers are thinking like me, though, in terms of the linebacker edition. I think that they're thinking pass rush to mask communication issues and help the linebackers be shepherded along a little bit. When Fred Warner went down, my first thought was Quincy Williams because I thought that the presence of Warner as a veteran pillar in that room to guide things along, he had seen thousands of snaps, was able to identify what the defense should be doing based on the play call. I thought that was really important to impart to all the youngsters and not put it all on the plate of the youngsters. it appears that the 49ers think that their young guys can handle the communication. And even if they can't handle it perfectly, they think they can get this pass rush back up to a level to where it's masking some of this. You know me, I'm very skeptical of that. I immediately thought the 49ers would need to bring in another pillar, like a makeshift pillar, while Bosa and Warner were out. That's why I said Quincy Williams. I mean, based on the Houston game, it seems that I was correct in my analysis because there was so many communication breakdowns in that game. But they also didn't have the pass rush. And, even if you have Warner back there, if the pass rush is non-existent, he's going to look bad too, because even great communication can't hold coverage for 4 seconds. So I do believe that pass rush first is a big thing. But if there is a linebacker with a lot of snaps, who fits the system, who knows Robert Saleh, that you can acquire for a reasonable price, yeah, I do think the 49ers should be interested, because it was scary to see the bottom fall out of the defense at Houston. Now, Lynch today seemed adamant that that was just a bad game. Obviously, they didn't have Huff. They're getting Bryce Huff back is big for the pass rush. He thinks that the 49ers will acquit themselves much better with who they already have in the building moving forward. He didn't rule out a trade for another pass rusher, and we know they've been interested in that. But the 49ers obviously have a higher opinion of what they do have in the building than what we might think following the debacle against the Houston Texans. So we'll see what ends up being right. We'll see, one game samples are dangerous, either too high or too low. You can't get too big off one game, and you can't get too down off of one game either. I'm really interested to see how they look against the New York Giants. Well, this is a funny joke, but this video is not called breaking news. This video is just called a 49ers update, but I get it. Breaking news, 49ers breaking. Yeah, player breaking. Funny. Not really, because there's so many injuries, and it's turning into a bit of a drag for everybody around the team, covering the team, following the team, a fan of the team. Nobody likes injuries. They're not fun, but they're also seem that they're ubiquitous across the entire NFL. You think that the Huff injury was the main reason why the 49ers couldn't pressure the quarterback? Well, I think you're right. I think that you can absorb a certain amount of injuries and still be productive, but you do hit a limit where you fall off of a cliff. And I think Bryce Huff was holding the pass rush together with some scotch tape and glue. You saw it against Atlanta. So when he went down with a hamstring, you lost your last remaining plus pass rusher. And lo and behold, you couldn't rush the quarterback. So yeah, that was huge. But how are they going to get through this next game? Probably without Bryce Huff, because that looks like it's going to be the case. And the best way to do it, if you're the 49ers right now, is to control the ball offensively. They couldn't do that offensively against Houston's number one defense. Their defense was exposed. And yeah, the fault of the game was more on the defense than it was on the offense for the 49ers. But you still have to think in terms of complementary football. Both sides of the ball have to help each other out. No, I don't think the 49ers can pick up some offensive line help at the deadline. Nobody's trading plus offensive linemen. Plus, what position do you want to improve? Like, you're not going to improve tackle. You already have two good tackles in Trent Williams and Colton McKivitz. You're getting Ben Barch back. He should start this week. That's the main weakness on the left side of the offensive line. Dominic Pooney playing with the injured knee, or at least early in the season, looked like he was still recovering from that injured knee. He's been getting better. He should be a plus guard. You could have 4+ linemen at the tackle and guard positions. And center is interesting because they're playing a backup in Matt Hennessy now. I think the book is still out on Matt Hennessy, but I don't think he's a bad player. I mean, the offensive line, if you're not starting a 7th-round rookie before he's ready, is fine. Everybody's just going to scream offensive line without any sort of logic to back things up. It's just because they're emotionally watching the game, and they think that the 49ers offensive line is the only one in the history of the game to allow pressure, when in fact, essentially every line in the NFL is allowing pressure. Even the Eagles have allowed quite a bit of pressure this year. So, and the Eagles are known as the be-all, end-all for offensive lines by some of these fans. So The 49ers are doing okay along that front if they can get Ben Barch in there and stay healthy at the left guard position. Because there are so many problems across offensive lines in the entire league, you're not going to be able to just get your hands on an offensive lineman on the trade deadline. Like, these guys are in short supply. Teams aren't just going to be trading offensive linemen around when they need them so badly ahead of the November 4th deadline. Greg wants to know how Keon is with the salary cap. He's only going to cost $772,000 this year. So that's actually a really good deal for San Francisco. 1.6 million next year. Also a good deal for an edge rusher. They inherited his rookie contract. By the way, we got a little bit of news here. Eddie Pinheiro, the 49ers kicker, has been named the NFC Special Teams Player of the Month for October. Pinheiro is yet to miss a field goal for the 49ers. He is 17 of 17. It is the best start in franchise history. So congratulations to Eddie, NFC Special Teams Player of the Month. Gary saying, why aren't the 49ers trying to poach anyone off practice squads that have elite positional play, offensive line, and edge rusher? Well, because elite guys are not on practice squads. The 49ers are trying to poach anybody they can at any position off a practice squad that they think can improve their roster. But, if you're on a practice squad, then you're not protected from being signed to another team's 53-man roster. There are not elite players on practice squads around the league. It's just the way that it is. Every single team is trying to get better. This is a hyper competitive league. I don't know when I'm visiting Visalia. Good question right here. When are you visiting Visalia? We will see. We will see. Next time in Visalia, we could do a fan meetup. Any more questions? A lot of comments coming in. When do I expect Ricky Pearsall back? I expect him back against the Rams. That's my read on this, my feeling on this. That'd be about 5 to 6 weeks. If it's a 4 to 6 week injury, the PCL, unfortunately, it will have ended up on the longer end of the spectrum. The 49ers thought earlier they might be able to get away with this being on the shorter end of the spectrum. You get him back on natural grass at Levi's. You get him back to full speed. He's not up to speed yet. John Lynch said that there might be a chance for this week, but if he's not there yet and it's already Thursday, then I'd be skeptical of that. Next week against the Rams for Ricky Pearsall. Then with Brock Purdy, it seems like this week is going to be really close. To me, it seems like it's 50-50 right now with Brock Purdy. And it definitely wasn't 50-50 in weeks prior. So I'm going to kick back and I'm going to wait to see what exactly happens at practice today. And then over the course of the 24 to 48 hours after the last long practice of the week, which is the Thursday afternoon one. Would I trade a second round pick for Trey Hendrickson? I actually would. I'm not sure the 49ers would. I think they would want to keep it at a 3. I guess it would depend, if you put a gun to my head, make me say yes or no. A simple answer would be yes, but I would also have to know, am I bidding against somebody else who's only offering a 3? Stuff like that. But I've talked to some very prominent players in the 49ers locker room who have an immense amount of respect for Trey Hendrickson. And they think that he would be a game-changing type of player for the 49ers. They think you'd fit perfectly with what the 49ers do because of the way that he can also play the run. And I think when you got a guy like that, if you could get him, just given 2021, that team wasn't supposed to be a contender either. They were 3-5. They were the number 20 defense in the league. They weren't a great defense, but Jimmy G and company, even though he was really hurt, Deebo Samuel that year, they found a way to plow their way into a 10-point lead in the NFC Championship game in the fourth quarter. Like, that team was very, very close to making the Super Bowl and maybe even winning it had they gone to the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals team that they had already beaten that season. So it just goes to show you that you should always be competing, especially if you're 5-3. It's the inverse right now. The 49ers are the inverse of what they were back in 2021 when they made it all the way to the NFC title game. So anyway, I would definitely consider trading a 2 for Hendrickson. I think the 49ers limit for Hendrickson would be a 3. Just feels that way to me. He would be a rental player. That's why it wouldn't be that steep of a cost, I think. But if they get outbid, or somebody wants to bid them to force them into a 2, I'm not sure they'll go into that territory based on what I'm gathering. I do know that they're interested. So we'll see how the next week or so progresses. Up on the San Francisco Standard right now is a cool article. Inside the 49ers Day of Change, as Keon White arrives and Brock Purdy makes progress. There you go. That's a nice picture of Keion White from Amber, our photographer. She was out at 49ers practice for the first time, taking some pictures for the Standard. I'm going to take this link. I'm going to put it into the description. I'm also going to put it into the comment section. You could support all that we do here by signing up for the San Francisco Standard. You could support me that way. It would be very much appreciated. And subscribing to the channel is a big show of support. I mean, I'm giving you guys, 3 or 4 shows a day, working over 2 jobs, writing all these articles. I mean, this one gets in depth about what happened yesterday in the 49ers facility with introductions. You could even watch a little bit of game tape right there. Keon White working against Aaron Banks and the 49ers last year. You can also see Brock Purdy practicing. Mac Jones practicing. Some really good photos from practice yesterday. There's Farrell and there is Keon White. Good stuff in the article. You know, maybe we even try to play this one very briefly. You could see Keon White. Jordan Elliott cut this tape up. Look at him just blow by Aaron Banks and destroy Brock Purdy. Crazy stuff. It impressed the 49ers. Now they have Keon White on their team. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you from the facility in a little bit.